Dan Brown's latest book, The Secret of Secrets. Apologies for the setup. I am moving apartments, and so haven't. Yeah. My initial impression of hearing the title for Dan Brown's new book is that's a ridiculous title. But I was traveling to Prague, which coincidentally I don't recommend doing solo if you are a person of color. But I was like, okay, I'm going to the city. I'll read this book that takes place there, so why not? There's a couple of things I fully expect from a Dan Brown book. I think the first act is usually very quickly paced. Things happen consistently. He's really good at ending chapters in a way where you go, ooh, what's gonna happen next? And then he switches perspectives, sort of keeping you on the hook before switching back to that perspective. The way information is dropped is sometimes a little clever. It sort of defies your expectation of how that information would typically be delivered in a thriller. And so for large chunks of this book, especially again the first act, the book is thrilling. Not in a I'm at the edge of my seat kind of thrilling, but you definitely want to know what happens next. You want to see all this the puzzle sort of form together. What makes this interesting compared to what it could have been is that you have the character of Catherine Solomon, who is an active foil to Robert Langdon. And I don't mean that in that they're in opposition to each other fully, but that they have that their disciplines put them in different spaces, if that makes sense. Right? They have Catherine deals in noetics, which is a sort of pseudoscience that Langdon doesn't really fully buy, but he really respects her as an academic. So there's a lot of interesting tension that I think is written well. It does feel like these two are adults who have a relationship and also would likely be on opposing ends of some discussions. Another skill that Dan Brown has that I think is sometimes maybe a bit underrated when people discuss his work, or maybe I just haven't seen more of the discussion, is he's very good at picking very fertile ground. The Da Vinci Code, the Catholic Church, Angels and Demons, the Illuminati, I think it was a Lost Symbol that took place in DC with the Freemasons, and now Prague with these hidden, shadowy CIA organizations. What's so effective about these sort of backdrops is that on the nature of what these organizations and or institutions are, they're very prone to conspiracy theories. People are very prone to buying into these conspiracy theories, or at the very least being interested in them on just account of what these organizations and institutions have been historically. The Catholic Church has a lot of secrets on power. The CIA has a lot of secrets on power. And it's very easy to sort of buy into the rhythm of having some, if not sympathetic, but understandable antagonists, because they're, for lack of a better phrase, going after institutions that we in real life are very prone to mistrusting for an often cases good reason. That being said, what really bogs down Secrets of Secrets, and why it goes from being, I think, a really fun, flirty book that you listen to on a flight, to me wanting the audiobook to be over as soon as humanly possible, is that Dan Brown, I don't know if this is a situation of where his editors are he's too famous now to take any notes, but this has been an issue with some of his previous work, in that he goes on and on and on and on and on. It's sort of like when you see a really good movie and you're like, wow, it's over. And then you realize there's like 40 minutes left. And you're like, I've already been here for an hour, 50 minutes. I don't know if this movie needs to be 2.5 hours long. And by the time you end the 2.5 hours length, you're like, oh, this really did not need to be 2.5 hours long. But it's a bummer because some of the twists and turns that you sort of expect from a Dan Brown novel at this point are fun, maybe somewhat fascinating, on a very lowbrow surface level. But it just keeps on going in a loop. And there is, I think, a really, really fun book in here that is like 200 pages shorter. And I think it's a lot more, and that would be a lot more effective than what we end up with. So yeah, I would say you could read it if you need something breezy. But I can't really recommend it, especially because the third act gets so bogged down in sort of swimming in its own circles. So if out of 5 stars, I would say 2, roughly. It's not terrible, but I think it turns out to be disappointing because for half the book, especially the first and second acts, you get an actually good, entertaining thriller. And then it just sort of it spends a little bit too much time up its own ass and not in a fun way. So that's Dan Brown's Secret of Secrets.